Hello and welcome to another edition of I'm Bastani with me, Aaron Bastani, at Aaron Bastani on Twitter. As ever, thanks so much for watching. As many of you will know, I have been a consistent critic of the EU. I have big problems with it. That's why for the last couple of months I've been backing Brexit. I backed it so much I even made a video for Novara Media. Go check it out. It's on our YouTube channel. It's called Why the Left Should Back Brexit. Doing very well. 20,000 views. Make sure not to read the comments. What's the reality of the situation as we're speaking now, beginning of June, 2 weeks ahead of the referendum? It's this. Debate has widened like we thought it would, right? I thought this debate would see a kind of emptying of the centre. People would not trust the centrist politicians. They would not trust the centrist arguments. We would see a polarisation occur, right? People move right, sure. Most people would move right. I think we all knew that would happen. But we also thought, at least I thought, some people would also move left. There would be some discussion around migration, around our relationship to Europe, Europe's place in the world in relation to capitalism, globalisation, and all the problems that are afflicting ordinary Britons since 2008 and the global financial crisis. That hasn't happened, okay? For whatever reason, that hasn't happened. The left hasn't got a dog in the race. I'd love it to be the case, but it simply hasn't. There's not a single big name Labour MP or big trade union that's backing this, despite the fact that there are many high-profile Eurosceptics in the media, in the Labour Party, and in the trade union movement, right? And why is that? Well, because when Jeremy Corbyn came out and said, I'm for Remain, the left understood that it had to really get in line with this guy, otherwise his leadership was potentially at stake. And I think that's probably correct. And if we'd had this referendum under New Labour before 2010, under Brown or Blair, I think the left argument would have been really salient, very clear and unique, and it may even have, overpowered the right-wing argument. Who knows, right? You'd have had people like McDonnell, like Corbyn, some journalists, some unions, being very vocal in terms of a progressive argument against the EU, but that hasn't happened. What's more, we're now getting threats, as we anticipated, of course, from people like Jean-Claude Juncker, people around sort of management, the political directorates of the European Union project, the Eurozone, and they're basically saying, we're going to play hardball if you leave, okay? We're going to nail you so hard, just like we played hardball with the Greeks last summer, around the time of the third financial bailout. Now, why would they do this? Britain, fifth largest economy in the world, 65 million people, huge market. Any rational organisation would want to renegotiate trade deals really quickly. Well, because if they don't make an example of us, if there is a quick and easy solution to this problem, then we clearly won't be the last country to leave the European Union. It sets a precedent for exit, peaceful exit, calm exit, one that doesn't hit people or economies hard. What's more important right now to the EU than money, than growth, than unemployment statistics is its sustained existence, right? Britain leaving the EU in a calm way, in a measured way, without going into recession, is an existential problem for the EU itself, okay? It creates the precedent, right? There is a backward gear after, more than 60 years. For the first time since 1957, there is a backward gear, not just for the EU, but for the Eurozone too. And I still believe that if Britain did leave the EU, neoliberalism would move from technical inevitability, how we manage the economy, the common sense of economics, to a political choice. And I think that's really, really important, okay? Now, what do I mean by neoliberalism? I mean, weak unions. I mean flatlining pay. I mean high profitability for the private sector, which is often expedited actively by government through outsourcing and through policy. To beat that thing, you've got to start having a conversation about it. I don't think we can have a conversation about it in the EU. Nevertheless, I'm for Remain. Now, why is that? Well, I think that if we did leave the EU in the context of a recession, the left's got no teeth, there's no leadership, no ideas. Yes, the discussion would change, the centre would hollow out, but in all probability, things would move right. UKIP got almost 4 million votes the last election. If we had to everyone on the left loves proportional representation, myself included. You know what? A majority of voters in the UK voted Tory or UKIP. Let's have PR and those guys form a coalition government, right? Not pretty. And I think the debate, if we did leave, in the short to medium term would move right. Because we've got an absence of political leadership on the left. Sad, but that's how it is. And in the last couple of weeks and months, people have been saying, Aaron, you know what? There's some validity to what you're saying, but if we leave, that's the end of freedom of movement. It wouldn't be, I don't think, but another argument altogether. And workers' rights would be, further decimated. By the way, I don't think the EU is a particularly good guarantee of that either. Another argument too. What I would say to those people, and I said it before and I still stick by it even though I'm saying Remain now, is this. There is a political faction within the Tory party. Guess what? They're doing pretty well right now. Michael Gove, Boris Johnson, Priti Patel, these kinds of people, they want the end of freedom of movement, okay? They want to smash workers' rights. They want to get rid of the minimum wage, stuff like that. They might not say it all the time, but that's what they want, okay? They want that. And they want that whether we stay in the EU or whether we choose to leave on June 23rd, okay? So do not be under the, I would say, misconception, the error of thinking that the EU guarantees these things against these kinds of people. The reason why this organisation has lasted so long, because it's so flexible, right? It can change, it can make provisions, it can make exceptions. It can make exceptions in regard to the UK staying in freedom of movement. Totally. Totally, totally, totally. So whatever happens on June 23rd, we need a movement, yes, around workers' rights, more so around migrants' rights. And that's not just for non-EU nationals, that's for EU nationals too, because these guys are coming for it, I promise you. I still stand by the claim that since the late 1980s, the British left, since we heard Jacques Delors talk about social Europe doesn't really exist, by the way, has outsourced large debates and policy areas around agriculture, around industrial policy, around trade policy, around migration policy, to Brussels and Strasbourg, right? It's the EU. Because we didn't need to think about it anymore. Literally, the left has not had a single original thought for 30 years around what a progressive agricultural policy looks like. Because it didn't have to. I think despite the fact that we might stay in this thing, I think we probably will stay in this thing, despite the majority of the left, the vast majority of the left saying we need to stay in this thing, come on, let's start really talking about progressive agricultural trade and migration policies in the 21st century, okay? Really important for Britain, really important, of course, for the rest of Europe too. So my conclusion is this. Pretty much all the criticisms I've voiced about the EU, its flaws and failures, I stand by them. My Euroscepticism personally came from studying EU trade and aid policy in regard to the Global South, specifically Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. I did a master's dissertation, right? And those policies have literally killed people, lots of people. So this is a reprehensible organisation. It's got a lot wrong with it. Certainly doesn't deserve the adjective of progressive, okay? That's my view on it. That certainly hasn't changed. Furthermore, I don't think it can be reformed. I don't think it can be reformed. I'd love it to be reformed. Wow. I don't think it can be reformed. For the precise reason I've laid out many, many times, you would need a progressive government in Germany. We're not going to see that for the best part of 10 years. That may change, okay? Things change. But despite all that, despite, I think, very good criticisms of the EU, despite the fact I don't think it could be democratised, despite even the fact I think the Eurozone is ready to go, okay? I think it's ready to go. And by the way, if we don't leave, I think somebody else will, sooner or later. Because more people, more countries are going to want referendums, right? Despite all that, I'm saying Remain. Now, why am I saying that? I think so much of the long-term stuff, the trends, is in our favour on the left. You look at the demographics, 20 million millennials in the UK, right? This is the avant-garde, this is the fulcrum for the automated luxury economies, okay? We know that on social attitudes, we know that on lifestyle kind of liberalism, we know that on racial composition, we know in terms of their material status, how much they're affected by the crisis. Things are changing, and at a certain point, I think in the next 10, 15 years, these people become the bedrock of not just the general public, but the electorate too. In the case of this referendum, this is basically a case of, you're trying to win the Premier League, you go away, middle of winter, you play for 0-0 draw. It's not sexy, it's not risky, and I love taking risks in politics, but I think right now that's what we have to do. We park the bus, we see it away, we make sure the worst case scenario doesn't happen. So what do you think? You know what I think? They tried to start a hashtag Bastani U-turn. That was somebody in the Navarra Media team. It didn't take off, did it? Well, thank God it didn't. Why don't you put those thoughts down on a different hashtag, please? Hashtag IMO Bastani, or reach out to me at Aaron Bastani, or the media titan itself at Navarra Media. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.